The Torah is an ancient document, which means that we cannot read it as if it were a modern Western document. Its words are laden with cultural content that its audience intrinsically understood, but is often opaque to a modern reader. Knowledge of the Torah's cultural symbols is necessary, without forgetting that language is as well full of cultural meaning. Just as someone from an ancient culture would have difficulty understanding our ideas, even if the words were properly translated for them, we also find ourselves struggling to understand all the cultural ideas that are carried in words from ancient texts. Translation of cultural ideas is difficult for many reasons. One of the most important is that often a target language does not have the words that would represent all the ideas and nuances present in the words of the source language. But beyond the obstacles presented by inadequate vocabulary, we encounter ideas communicated from within and with reference to an unfamiliar cultural framework. We are inclined to interpret texts from the perspective of our own cultural network without accounting for the cultural framework native to the text we are reading. When we look at some of our cultural environments or currents, this is what we have. We have democracy. We have social networking. We have market economy. We have globalism, etc. Compared to that of the ancients, where a very different cultural river flowed throughout all the neighboring cultures. In the ancient cultural river, we would find currents such as community identity, the comprehensive and universal control of the gods, the role of kingship, divination, the centrality of the temple, the mediatory rule of images, the effectual and essential role of sacrifice, and the reality of the spirit world, and then magic. When God communicated with them, He communicated within the context of their cultural rivers, or symbols, or context. The message took shape according to the internal logic within their language and culture. So we must therefore find the message of God as communicated through those cultural and language intermediaries in their ancient cultural rivers or context. We have to begin by setting aside the presuppositions of our cultural rivers with all our modern issues and perspectives in order to engage the cultural river of the ancient communicators. The communicators that we encounter in the Torah are not aware of our cultural rivers, including all of its societal aspects. They neither address our cultural river nor anticipate it. We cannot therefore assume that any of the streams of our cultural river are addressed specifically in Scripture. This does not mean, however, that the Torah becomes irrelevant to us. No. If we have any hope of understanding texts that are resident in another cultural river, like that of the ancients, we need the service of a cultural broker. A cultural broker helps build bridges between people of different cultural backgrounds in order to facilitate communication. So we need someone who will be our agent, someone who is sufficiently knowledgeable in both the source culture and the target culture to identify what hurdles might be encountered in trying to understand and then give explanation in terms that will make sense. You thought I was going to say language. Yes, good translation of the language is important, but understanding is not accomplished by simply translating the words. Let me borrow an example from a friend to illustrate this. There is a new practice of celebrating what they call Pi Day. Pi as in P-I-E Day, Pi Day, and is celebrated on the 14th of March. Pi Day, at the level of translation, sounds like an opportunity to celebrate by eating some pie. And it is. But why celebrate on March 14th? For that, a cultural broker is necessary. Someone who is sufficiently knowledgeable in both the source and the target culture. In our culture, we can use numerical representations for dates. And in America, March 14 could be written 3/14. Now, a mathematical technicality is associated with these numbers when we replace the slanted line 3/14, when we replace that slanted line with a decimal point, it becomes 3.14. If you know what 3.14 is, you will realize that it is the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. But still, if you're not a mathematician, or if you're not interested in math, this is not enough information to make the connection. A cultural broker would next have to explain that mathematicians have agreed to represent this constant by the Greek letter pi, 3.14, which happens to be a homonym to the English word pie, a delicious pastry. We have now therefore discovered that the connection also makes use of wordplay. So when we celebrate Pi Day on March the 14th, we're not celebrating eating pie. We are celebrating mathematics. A cultural broker must understand the values and beliefs of both cultures and be willing and able to bridge the given culture's belief systems. This interpretive approach works on the primary assumption that various cultures do not simply have different words for the same basic ideas. They have fundamentally different ideas that they use their words to convey. And those words often have only a superficial similarity to the words another culture might use. So clearly, good translation of the language is important, but understanding is not accomplished by simply translating the words. Modern Bible readers need cultural brokers who can move beyond the translation of the ancient legal sayings of the Torah.